everybody. Welcome to Magers Quinn. My name is Matthew, and I am a bookseller as well as an events operator here at the store. And I just want to go ahead and start off tonight's event by thanking every single one of you for coming out and joining us tonight in Uptown. As an independent retailer of books, especially here in Uptown, we cannot do what we do without your support, even just by being here and spreading the word about what we do here in Uptown. So from the bottom of all of our hearts here at Magers Quinn, I just want to thank you for being here and being part of what we do. So yeah, a brief rundown as to what tonight is going to entail. We'll get through my very brief introduction. Don't worry, I'll be out of your hair very shortly. And then we will be hearing from our lovely author this evening with a reading, followed by conversation. After that, we will be taking questions for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how the conversation goes. So if anything pops up during the event, go ahead and lock that away. And then we will return to that if there is time. But if not, we will then adjourn from this space, past our lovely table of refreshments, which you are all welcome to. Minnesota Nice be damned. Take as much as you want. There's plenty. On your way up to the front, where we do have copies of both authors' books. We have tonight's book, The War Ends at 4, available, as well as Peter Geye's work, The Ski Jumpers. Both will be available for signing, as well as questions and comments as well. So, speaking of our authors, Rosanna Staffa is an Italian-born author. The War Ends at 4 is her debut novel. Her work can be found in Best Short Fictions 2021, The Sun, Tampa Review, Gargoyle, and other literary magazines. She is the winner of the 2020 TSR Nonfiction Prize, honorable mention for the Tiferet Journal 2019 Writing Contest Award, a McKnight recipient, and a Pushcart nominee. She has an MFA in fiction from Spalding University, as well as a PhD from Università degli Studi in Milan. How did I do?
Bene, benissimo.
She is also a member of the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis and of the Italian Cultural Center in Minneapolis, and is the Italian American Writers Association in New York. And Peter Geye is the author of the award-winning novels Safe from the Sea, The Lighthouse Road, and Wintering, winner of the Minnesota Book Award, Northernmost, and most recently, The Ski Jumpers, which is available for purchase. Geye has received his MFA from the University of New Orleans and his PhD from Western Michigan University, where he was the editor of Third Coast. He currently teaches the year-long novel writing project at the Loft Literary Center. Born and raised in Minneapolis, he continues to live here with his family. Everyone, please welcome me in joining Rosanna Staffa and Peter Geye.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Magers Quinn for welcoming here in this very special night, and Peter Geye for being with me. He has been part of this journey since the very beginning, so wonderful. And also, I want to thank all the readers and writers here. I read once that the novel doesn't truly exist until he meets his readers. So I want to thank you for making my novel exist. In this story, I asked the question that I asked myself: who we are when we're separated from our familiar context. And this happens sometimes because we move away, but sometimes it's emotional. We follow a path that is not aligned with the family expectations, and that's also complicated. And the space, in this space of separation, whether physical or emotional, has a lot of daring, has a lot of solitude, and these are the two emotions that play in the novel. The war is the subtext of the story, like it was a subtext in my life in Italy and in the life of this little family in Milan. The father is a survivor of World War II. So is the presence of an absence, as Henry James put it, always there and not there. In my novel, Renata, an Italian acupuncturist from Milan, comes to Minneapolis, meets a very charming actor, who's also very charming off stage, unfortunately. And there is a little crisis in the relationship, there is a little crisis in a wonderful little clinic, and this makes her question her choice of living in America. And I can read from. Thank you. It was a difficult weekend in Minneapolis with wind, snow, and rain. Steve had promised to call from California, but did not. Renata had not been able to reach him. His cell phone was off, as usual. The receptionist at the theater in LA, where he was in rehearsal, told Renata that she gave Stephen the message. Her voice sluggish with late night socializing, so who knew what would happen? Renata stayed up watching cartoons. Mice and birds chasing each other, tap dancing, going up in smoke. She felt restless, missing her cigarettes. In fragments of dreams, Steve came in through a window like a burglar and told her that he had fallen in love with a street musician on the 3rd Street promenade in Santa Monica and would not return home. Why stay awake waiting for me? He'd always ask her when he came home late at night. He told her that he had been at the house of fellow performers after rehearsal, and he maintained that the entire cast was there. They talked again of traveling to Milan in the summer to see her father and brother. Perhaps this year they would have the money. Dizzy from a glass of wine, Renata agreed, but her family rattled around in her brain like restless ghosts. What are you doing in America? Doing something good? What are you doing? Steve knew a few words in Italian, but no verbs. He could not eat, sleep, or love in Italian. Mangiare, dormire, amare. He could not lie, mentire. She remembered his fling a few years before with a woman in Colorado, crazy for horses. One time only. In the 5 years they'd been together, he swore. His phone was still off. She could only wait. Aspettare. On Monday, she arrived at the clinic Wellness Within Acupuncture and Herbs right before Tessa, her colleague. Rain beat on the windows, and Renata and Tessa worried about making rent. They plastered notices everywhere, advertising the clinic at local stores and the corner co-op. Renata could see shreds of discolored flyers fluttering in the wind like flyers of surrenders. A brand new poster was hovering over the flyers in red and blue crayon intensity, featuring Barack Obama, pensive face, and the word hope. A Hillary Clinton for president poster communicated a steely determination at the bus stop a few steps away. Hillary should run Wellness Within, Renata thought. It could do with some Hillary determination. Her brother Tito called from Milan where Renata was ripping the disposable paper from the treatment bed of the last patient, a dancer. Irregular, he had come in for her backache, fussy and unshaven. A $20 bill at 2 comps to see my show at the Pantages. Is that okay? He asked, it's not La Scala, but you know. He was one of the many pay-as-you-pay patients. One client had given her new sneakers, another read her tarot cards. A few lawyers, a couple of financial advisors, and a butcher were keeping the clinic afloat. You might not see me again, dottore, the dancer said. My back is doing too well. You know, you're too good. Don't miss me too much, okay? She would miss him very much. Just as she did, all her other patients were left the unfinished stories behind. A young woman who was going to cut off her hair in the spring. A painter taking a night train to his exhibit in Chicago. And a timid man who had moved to Atlanta to follow his new love. A guy with an accent is on the phone. Says he's your brother, Tessa announced, loud enough that Renata could hear her through the half-open door at the treatment room. Tito only called at Christmas, if she didn't call first. Their exchanges were invariably short, breezy, casual, due to habit as well, to the excessive, in distance rates. Tito, tell me, she said. Reni, ready? Yeah, it's about Papusi. Papusi was their nickname for their father, a blunt man with frizzy white hair and an excess of cheeriness. The doctor says, Dr. Erici, the one at the hospice, correct, right? Sant'Erasmo, correct? He fumbled with language as if he were learning each time to speak anew. Tito, what are you saying? But she knew, despite Tito's eccentric sequence of non sequiturs. God, it seemed, at last wanted to take Papusi with him. Her father had lived so long that Renata had assumed God had forgotten him in his tiny Milan apartment overlooking the train station. Reni, Tito said. I'm coming, she said. Immediately, yes. Tito the frightened easily as a child. Wind, even birds, all conspire to alarm him. Don't worry, there is no use in worrying, she said, repeating the words that her father had often told them while their mother was dying, and too tired to see the children. They stood against the wall just outside her sick room. After she died, she left behind the memory of a Brancusi-like shape in the doorway and a shopping list in her pretty handwriting. Cipolle, patate novelle, piselli. Renata stored the shopping list in a box. She liked to keep track of things that never happened. On the train from Malpensa International Airport into Milan, Renata fingered the dead cell phone in her pocket. She found the gesture comforting. She felt a shot of anxiety. As another traveler wandered aloud as to good restaurants in Milan, she hoped nobody would discover her to be a local and ask for suggestion, for she knew only sketchy dives and no appetizer, just an occasional Roman selling roses. The train was almost empty by the time she arrived at Stazione Centrale, and Renata felt happy getting off alone in the milky light of a foggy afternoon. It was quiet under the high-vaulted ceiling of a station, and still she walked out into the bustle of Via Ferrante a Porta. Milano, she thought with a surge of recognition. Home. The bearded, heavy-lidded man at the newspaper kiosk gave a cursory assessment to her legs when she stopped to ask for a newspaper. Il Corriere della Sera, she breezily requested in her perfectly Milanese accented Italian. Quickly, though, his attention turned to the coins that she had dropped in the plastic bowl. Signorina, this is change for what? Chewing gum? He demanded. The price listed in the upper corner of Il Corriere della Sera, she then realized, was almost 300 lire, which seems an exorbitant amount. Hey, all right, I've been away a long time, she muttered, fumbling in her wallet. It cost a few lire then, okay? Yeah. Her feisty Milanese attitude was as perfectly intact as her Italian. DeLong, you still have a Milanese accent. Germany, Switzerland? They reach closeness by attrition, the Milanese way. Nah, America, she replied. Oh dear, all the way there. Renata gave him a distracted nod and hurried off. Living in Milan had not been that easy either. She and Tito had been teased by bullies at school called Terroni, Dirtitas, Filthy Southerners, just for having been born in Naples. Terroni were deemed foreign to many Milanese and their customs suspect. Little Tito used to walk close to her as they passed through the schoolyard, humming a tune to show that he was not afraid. "Stop that," she'd say, picking up stones, just in case. In Minneapolis, she felt a lightness, as if the memory of childhood hostilities could be shed together with her native language, one word at a time. "So what's the big deal about being a Neapolitan in Milan?" an acupuncture patient at once asked her. "We are considered our inferior status by many idiots," Renata replied. "As a Neapolitan, you're often treated differently, offered lower-level jobs, and you're a bit grateful, angry, and grateful." She'd heard of things had improved, but her recollection of past lives was still sharp and cut deep. "Well, I'm glad you're in America now," the patient had said. "Aren't you?" "Sure, yes," Renata replied, but she had missed the gruff Milanese manners, the signal familiarity, the cheap MS cigarettes, nicknamed Morte Sicura, sure that, and the ancient osteria along the Navigli canals, where after midnight a stranger would sing or play the guitar. "And what else about Milan?" the patient asked. "Not much," she had said with a chuckle. It was a lie. There had been a young man in Milan that Renata had fallen hard for. But he was not interested. She was too shy, the quiet type, she knew, the kind of private person the friends playfully chided to watch her blush. One evening at a party, she'd been alone in the kitchen when the young man, Cosimo, sought her out. They smoked together in a comfortable silence, as if they knew each other inside out. She had returned to the memory sparingly over the years, and felt reluctant to contaminate it. Cosimo was darkly handsome and possessed a quick urgency in his movements. Women were crazy for him. That evening, in the kitchen over cigarette, Cosimo casual glance had made her knees weak. Grazie.
One of the things I like most about this night is the fact that it's been like 7 years in the making. And I'm so excited for you and so proud of you. I hope it doesn't sound condescending to say that.
No.
And maybe that's where we can begin. This novel, which I first read 7 years ago, Rosanna was a student of mine at the Loft in the first year of the novel writing project. This book, The War Ends at 4, you started writing back then. How has it changed in the 7 years since, and how have you?
Well, it has changed because I was, in the beginning drafts, I was kind of busy attracting attention to the meaning, while later I felt, no, it should be like a piece of music. The people are attracted to it because they found an assonance. Is it called an assonance? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they walk in and find themselves in it. I wanted that. And so whenever I found the adverb, whenever I found, and then she felt, and then how do you feel, and this and that, I went, via. Whenever I found myself wanting to drag in, making sure that the reader was reading, that looking over the shoulder of writing, I went, no, don't do that. Try and take him in. It was a strange and dangerous path, and I did it. And also, I want to tell you, in the beginning, you and others have told me that they wanted the taste of Milan. And of of course. Like all good suggestions, I scoffed at it. And what else now? You know? It was fantastic. I realized I wanted to go home. So I took myself home. I wanted to smell it. I wanted to taste it. It was just a very personal journey.
You said recently we were talking, and I'll paraphrase you, but I think this speaks to part of what you were saying. You were describing how you thought so many American novels and so many Americans are busy trying to find answers to questions. And you think that Italians, not all, but many, and many Italian novels are busy asking questions.
Yes, I believe that's true. I think that mostly because when you go through a war, like World War II, there are really no answers, you know, and the subtext, I'm getting goosebumps, and the subtext is what you live with. I live with this subtext since I was a child. As children in school, there were the posters of the landmines, hand grenades, things that we might find, and please do not touch them. And of course, we took our showers when I'm trying to find them, especially. I gotta tell you, we had a name for the hand grenades. We called them the iron turtles. So we thought, if one of us finds the iron turtles, is so lucky. And I said, I want to be lucky. Luckily, we didn't find the iron turtles. And then there were so many complicated things like, okay, this is really subtext, but I remember we would drive through a street and all the leaves, all the trees had leaves, little buds, and there was one tree that was alive, but gave no flowers, no buds. And I said, but it's alive. And I said, why? And someone told me that a very young partisan, a little boy, had been hung from that tree. And you know, the poet Virgil has an expression, lacrima rerum, the tear of things. And when you're facing something like that, where things react with tears and sorrow, it's complicated. This is something I witnessed. So, and you know, there are always the things like, you know, you go and buy milk, and the man who sold you milk, he was a black shirt. You know, and what do you do? And you still live with the same people right there. It's a small, you know, it's a complicated thing, war, you know. And I think actually the writing is often disconnected because our sense of what happened is disconnected. The Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, it's perfect because it's so fragmented. He was talking of his PTSD. He was a partisan, you know, so, you know, it's, how else are you saying it? You know, so he said it the way he saw reality now, you know.
My goodness. It's a beautiful answer, and I mean, I'm not at all surprised to hear it, but it's fascinating to hear it elaborated on like that. You know, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that we were asking for more Milan, and you admit to scoffing. I'd like to point out that we could have been here 4 years ago if she had taken that advice. Maybe. I'm just kidding. But I wanted to, and we've just heard lovely passages from your book. I wanted to read one paragraph on the subject of Milan. Well, on the subject of Milan for starters. But this is soon after Renata has arrived. She pulled her scarf up to cover her chin against the cold, driven like an old dog following a familiar route. And then she was at Piazza Duomo. She looked up dazed. The audacity of the tall spires, even the flight of pigeons, seemed orchestrated in a precise choreography to stun the viewer. The years-long cleaning completed at last, the scaffolds had been taken down, and the Duomo's white spirals were pristine against a bruised sky. There was a stern silence to the glory of the marble, which filled her with pleasure, touched by melancholy. Which, whew, talk about goose pimples. Passages like that, passages where Renata finds herself in the city of her childhood, feeling that very particular or sensing that very particular melancholy, abound in this book, not in a repetitive way, but in a way that is, to my way of reading it, sort of constantly reminding us that this is not her home anymore, that she's like a visitor in this place. Is Minneapolis her home? And she feels a little bit disconnected from both of them, which sounds to me like it could be part of your own experience in life.
It's hard to know where you belong. It's about belonging. And there are moments where I go, oh God, I'm here. And then there are moments where I go, I'm not. There is such a tension between going towards the new and exciting, but you don't want to betray your old people. Sometimes I feel that if I love Minneapolis too much, which I do, then my mom, if she was alive, would be a little bit taken aback, or something. There is this strange sense of having a little bit of a betrayal, and the line between observing yourself and belonging, solitude, is so thin. It's a razor blade, to say, where am I? I've known it since very little. My family moved a lot. And actually, I think that made me a writer, because I was very young and I had to learn dialect. In Italy, we speak dialect as children. And I had to learn Venetian dialect, and it made me listen. So I think I kept that listening capacity that I do over here. I was talking to about being on buses in Milan, and I miss buses in Milan because people are kind of uncensored when they talk on a bus or in the subway in Milan. And I remember one time I didn't want to get off the bus. I said, "What? What did he do?" Because they kept going, "And guess what?" And I said, "Guess what? What?" And I said, "I'm gonna miss the stupid meeting. I want to hear what, because people are great storytellers on public transportation. I highly recommend it. I miss it immensely,
Do you, that's a perfect story.
It's true.
How does it work for you? How does language work for you? I feel like we've talked about this and I just don't remember.
Because there is no way to really know. If I think about it, I'm terrified I will not be able to write in English. I got to tell you the truth. But here is the story. English attracts me because it's very dynamic. All these gerunds, ing, 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 we're going, we're doing, all these verbs. And Italian is, is opera. It starts with a vowel, it ends with a vowel. There is this sense of melancholia. And for me, when I think in Italian, write in Italian, there is a melancholia because I was interrupted. I interrupted, There is a sense of interruption, and whatever you interrupt that is basic to you is not so easy. But I really do love English. I feel very privileged. And I approach it as a stranger. I like things that other people don't even notice. And I love that there is a language that has a subtext and things that I still don't know. The other day, someone told me, "Oh, that is not what we say." I said, "Oh, I invented it." You know, I mean, I better watch out. You know, it's like writing and speaking. Well, I should say. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. English is also not the language of emotions, because I will never have an ambush of emotions in English, because those words were not spoken by my mother, by my father, by nobody. So in a way, it's like wearing a mask and being on stage, you know, like an actor on stage. And so I have to say there is a certain freedom from being attacked by a sudden memory and a sudden, what did you say? Oh my God, you know. I remember I was in Rome, and every now and then I saw my father, because they had all these men with the hat and the cane and going around very elegant, and I said, I gotta get out of Rome right now. But, you know, it's a marvelous city. One thing, though, the language does, I give you an example. If I say Napoleon cake with pineapple cream and mixed berries, it's okay. But if I say torta mille foglie con crema di ananas e amarene, not only I'm drooling, but I'm walking with my family on a Sunday morning to get the cake. And that's maybe the best example I can find. It just came to me, but you know, because in Italy we only eat sweets on Sundays.
That makes the accomplishment of the book all the more incredible. I thought that was just a beautiful expression, to be ambushed by emotion. This book is full of moments that ambush the reader emotionally.
Me too. But
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You mentioned melancholia too, just the sound of the language, and I don't want to dwell on it because it's not exactly a sad book. In fact, I don't think of it as a sad book at all, but as more of a thoughtful and introspective one. But there's that quality, and you use that very particular word a few times in the book at what seem like really important moments to me, including the one that I read. And I wonder if that is your sense of the book, that if there is a dominant emotion in the book that the characters share, is it melancholy?
I think so, because even the ones who stay, like Cosimo is a bit of the shadow of Renata, who she could have been if she hadn't left, you know. So there is always this sense of the what if, the ghost of the what if in the book. And I think yes. But also, you know, I am Neapolitan. And Neapolitan write with humor and melancholia is their characteristic for Neapolitans, you know, that they are funny and then sad, funny and sad, you know. And so, yeah, I think I would think so, yeah.
One of the things that I think is so fascinating about this book, and one of the things that I've loved about it from the beginning, is Papuzzi, is the character of Papuzzi, who I don't think it's a spoiler alert to say that he dies early in the book, and so much of what happens is in response to his death, between Renata and her brother, and her time in Milan, and how she's learning to, you know, figure out who she might be in the world in his absence. And first of all, how do you make a dead man come alive that way? I'm asking for craft lessons here, Rosanna. But also, do you think of his presence in the novel as ghostly or as something else?
I think he animates it, and I wanted his strength there. Because his dad is a survivor of World War II, but I think he teaches that you keep going and you don't let them win. So for me, his presence as a vigor, not just the sadness, just the sense of, you know.
I think that if he were alive to advise Renata, it would be away from Cosimo. I'm just saying. I wanted to jump through the book to caution her. One of the words you've mentioned several times tonight, Rosanna, is subtext. And this book is called The War Ends at 4. It is nothing at all like a war novel. There are no bullets, there are no battles, at least not in real time. And that the quality of the subtext of the subject of war, but of several other subjects as well, especially the belonging or not belonging, the American political situation during the, what election was that, 2012?
I don't know.
No,
I don't remember.
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Obama's first year.
Yeah.
It's such a delicate way of telling story, and I do think that it's a not very, I mean, I don't know that it's uncommon, but the artfulness with which you tell those parts of the story is certainly remarkable. I thought maybe as a last question, or as a last question, and I think you're going to read just a couple more passages, you could talk a little bit about what the war means in the context of this book and how it haunts everyone, not just Papoose.
Well, it's what the family wants to heal from, and I know it's, you know, and here is Renata looking for acupuncture, and acupuncture is something you tap in yourself. It's not something outside that gives you strength. So I think the lesson that Papoose was trying to give to the kids, and he was successful to give to her, was find your way, there is a way, find your way. You know, don't say they won. You know, so.
Maybe you'll read for us that last passage.
The last passage. Upon waking, Renata felt cold. She was angry at being broke, angry at being stuck in a cheap hotel with inadequate heating and one thin blanket. The hum of an airplane, a soft metallic din coming from somewhere far away, filled the room, and Renata felt like the only person left behind in a ghost town. She thought of Papoose lying alone in this gray light. She grew tired of him being dead. Peering outside, she took in the monochrome of winter afternoon in Milan. She opened the window, and a rush of chaos and noise met her. It seemed to have been waiting in a suspended state just for her. Trams, kids off to school, young men and women in leather jackets walking fast, holding Esselunga supermarket bag with last-minute shopping. Within the din, she recognized phrases from childhood. Aspettami un momento, ecco l'autobus. No, non lo toccare. The sounds pull her in like a tune. Da, 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 da. She knew what the passerby were returning to at home, and the poems the children had memorized for school. The rhythmic sounds of the familiar felt intoxicating. An older man poked furtively with his cane a sidewalk litter, disturbing a flock of sparrows. He followed the birds to the next gathering spot and repeated the action with his stick, looking invigorated by his small power of scaring birds. I forget everything, Papoose used to say, but he remembered the Neapolitan pet name his mother had given him as a child, Uccedruzzo, little bird. Her gaze returned to the old man, now walking away with a smile. Probably he was off to enjoy the classic glass of wine with buddies before dinner. Papusi, a common of that age and inclination, lycanthropes. Wolves hiding under innocuous clothes. They led quiet lives, but hid dark past as fascist black shirt, were locked up Jews, anti-fascists, and soldiers in cattle cars on train track 21. Those train cars had been hidden below the stairs in the belly of Stazione Centrale, so that the sight of them leaving for concentration camps would not offend the eyes. Transport to concentration camps was a necessity. Why disturbs people's conscience? Papusi and the other prisoner had been led through a side entry on Via Ferrante a Porti, down to the lower level in pitch dark. One Sunday afternoon, Renata and Tito listened to a scratchy record from Papusi collection. Marlene Dietrich sang Lili Marlene in German. The children bent their arms like wings and danced in the tiny kitchen. For the Kaserne, for the großen Tor, stand eine Lanterne, who steps in octavo. And so what happened to Signor Marini, Papusi, after the war? Signor Marini was a big shot fascist in Milan when he had been carted off to Mauthausen. He shrugged, squinting hard, as if something blocked his view, then looked at his children, attentively awaiting an answer. All that seemed to matter to him at that moment was the light falling through the window, enveloping the family in a golden shaft, like a medieval painting. A bear ate him. It died of poison, he responded with a chuckle. Thank you.
So now it's your turn to ask Rosanna any questions you all have. This is the dreaded pause before the conversation with the audience begins. It only takes one question.
I mean, I could think of a bunch of questions, but as you were speaking about language, I was thinking about, I've written papers in Italian, but, the idea of writing a book in a second language, I'd be interested to hear, and obviously you've lived here a long time, so you have an advantage there, but about the decision, of writing it in Italian versus in English, and I like from the passages so far that, there's a lot of Italian in the book.
Okay, the true story is the following. I had no choice. I really wanted to write. My English was so-so. I was an acupuncturist in Los Angeles, and my colleague, Baljeet Khalsa, was very into, meditation and this and that, and one day I said, Baljeet, I was scared of death, but more terrifying for me was, what is it called when you come back?
Reincarnation.
Reincarnation. I was terrorized. I said, what? It's over and it's not over. What is the point? So I told Baljeet, tell me, what do I need to do not to reincarnate? And he said, well, it's easy. Tell me, you cannot leave anything unfinished that you wanted to do. That's the real story.
One of the first conversations that we had was, part of it anyway, was about your, reticence about writing a novel in English.
Yeah. Because, a short story, it takes as long as a novel, and as hard as a novel. But the term tricks you. Mm-hmm. So you might take months and years, but you say, it's just a short story. It says short in the title, of course it takes a short time. But a novel seemed also so daunting. And then I thought I could have taken so many wrong paths, and here is where the mentorship, it's important. Because, I did take some wrong paths. I remember it. You remember it. And of course, sometimes I will bring the stuff, and your hope is that you hear the response, don't change a comma.
I don't know why you keep looking at me. Your classmates are all out here.
I did change a few commas, I confess. So, yeah, it was a long path. I can't believe I did it, but.
Have you written it in Italian, or have you wanted to get it published in Italian?
This novel? Oh, it would be a totally different novel. I often feel the ghost of this novel walking by me, of the other novel. It would not be this novel because the emotions and the way of expressing things will be very different. And actually, and I tell you, recently a small Italian magazine asked me to write about being an outsider in Italian, or they could translate. And I said, no, I'll write it myself. And when I wrote it, my association became so wide and so wild because I was using, as I was saying, terms, you know. And I know Nabokov. I remember reading the Nabokov, written his bio in English, and then someone asked him to translate it in Russian, and he wrote a completely different one. I hope I answered your question. Yeah. No, it was English, and I went for the English. And also Italian, I hadn't written in Italian.
Is it one of your goals to not come back reincarnated to write something?
Yeah, don't remind me things that I have interrupted, or I'll have to go home and write in Italian. But it will be a totally different novel. It's be another sensitivity, another way of doing it.
Are you going to do an audiobook, and if so, will you read it?
Oh, I don't know. You know, I have to tell you this thing. In my head, I don't have an accent. So when I read, I say, who's this? I have to get used to it. I totally don't have an accent in my head. So I'm startled every time by this intruder. You know? I don't know if that, no. You have to learn another language and then hear yourself. Go, what? What is it?
I don't hear an accent. I mean, of course I hear an accent, but I've learned to talk with you in a way that when I first knew you, I would sometimes miss a word, and now I never miss a word.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's really a wonderful thing. This is completely magic. Thank you for saying that.
Do you feel that the sense of belonging or feeling removed, you know, somehow from, you know, when you left Milan and then you go back and you say, well, I'm a tourist where I grew up and I'm not really part of the American culture. So is it unique to someone who's an immigrant or maybe the child of an immigrant that a person born here would not experience that same sense of feeling disconnected from part of their own personal history?
Well, if someone, as I said before, made choices not aligned to their family expectations, there is a disorienting sense, I think, to their lives. But you know, I think that I feel I'm not conscious of being Italian unless I'm the only Italian. So if I'm the only Italian, I say I'm Italian, you know, but when I'm in Italy, I'm not. You know, this is the best way for me to respond. When I'm in Italy, I'm in Italy. You know? I buy the newspaper, you know.
So there are a couple different things that I've been thinking about this novel and writing sort of in general. And one is when an author writes about something that's familiar to them, the audience tends to think of it as your life, right? Or something that an author has experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, there's the idea that we as writers often want to distance ourselves from that to create what's called fiction, right? So how did you negotiate those two things?
I did not.
You did not.
I think that I was adamant that the emotional had to be absolutely 200% emotional authenticity. And then maybe some of the things these things, I mean, the moments things happened, the people I encountered were pieces of people I met, not this one specific person. There is a little me in Cosimo too, you know. Sometimes I put little pieces in and especially the more risky and strange ones, because I could afford it in Cosimo. Who's going to think Rosanna is Cosimo? And now I gave it away, but, you know, of course. But, you know, it's just, I don't, that's my response.
So when you say authenticity, do you mean authenticity to the character of Renata or to your experience? This is kind of
Well, I mean, it's, to the character of Renata, but I have to enter it. Otherwise, how do I know what she's doing? So there is always a risk. I mean, I had this delusion the fiction would be safe. No, it isn't. You know, you're still there, and you're there in full, and you take your chance. For me, for other writers, I don't know.
We have time for probably one more question. Yeah.
I wanted to tell you that while I was reading the book, I was so happy about how you use Italian in the book. It was not just, maybe because I'm an Italian, but it was the way you used it that I thought was very successful. And you trusted your readers, even your English readers, to be able to have a sense of what those words meant. And so maybe if you have an answer to how you chose those, were those expressions that were important to you, or it just came to you? I don't know, I loved it.
I think that was a moment where we could be in a piece together in a different way, maybe. That the reader would come closer to me, even if I spoke something so personal. And I think you told me to use Italian when I wanted to, right? I have this memory. So I went for it. See, this man is very important for this.
I'll take all the credit I can.
You should. Go ahead.
Rosanna, I'm so happy for you and so proud of you and excited about this beautiful book. I hope you'll all buy a copy for yourself and several as gifts. And thank you so much.
Grazie. Grazie a tutti.